Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for being with us. Just over 3 years out from the toxic train derailment that rocked the community in East Palestine, people who lived and worked there during that time are starting to see lawsuit settlement payments from Norfolk Southern Railway, and not everyone is happy about what they're receiving. The only payments that have gone out so far are related to personal injury, because up until last week, personal property and business-related claim payments were on hold as the U.S. Supreme Court considered whether to review a challenge to the $600 million settlement. Last week, the court refused to hear that case, so those delayed payments will be sent out to the 55,000 members of the class action lawsuit soon. We'll have to wait and see how people feel about that once those checks start arriving. When it comes to the personal injury part of this settlement, there are several concerns being raised by class members and their advocates, including smaller than expected checks, questions over whether people were misled into joining the class, and a desire for some to remove themselves from the class due to additional health issues that showed up after they had filed their claims. Today, we'll be talking about class action settlements in this installment of our ongoing Law of the Land series. We'll get an update on the lawsuit in East Palestine with people who were impacted by the derailment and hear from an attorney who specializes in these kinds of lawsuits to help us understand what's typical in a case like this. Now, before we get to that, we want to bring you news that just came down yesterday in a different lawsuit related to cleanup costs of the derailment between the state of Ohio and the U.S. government against Norfolk Southern. The federal judge overseeing that case is allowing a motion to intervene to introduce new evidence, which is being headed up by Mindy Bish, managing partner at the Keenan Law Firm. Mindy is with us now by phone to tell us about this major development in that case. Mindy, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Thanks for being here.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, Mindy, if you can tell us, what is a motion to intervene and why is that so critical in this separate case?
A motion to intervene is asking the court to allow us to enter a lawsuit that we did not file. So the United States and the state of Ohio are the people who actually filed the lawsuit against Norfolk Southern. So we were asking to become involved as an interested party in that lawsuit.
And I do want to let people know we did reach out to Norfolk Southern for a comment on this development. We sent that request this morning and haven't heard back yet. Norfolk Southern did share a statement with NPR member station WOSU in Columbus last month before this new development. We will read that in a moment. So, Mindy, explain to us, what will you be doing now that you'll be able to introduce evidence in this lawsuit?
Well, this will be the first time that the actual citizens, both in Pennsylvania and Ohio, will be able to take evidence that they believe is important and actually present it in a court of law. So we will be presenting the evidence of the testing that was done that shows widespread contamination as of now. And we will also be presenting the evidence of the illnesses and deaths that have occurred, and asking the court to look at this consent decree that the United States is proposing to enter in with Norfolk Southern and find it wholly inadequate based on the evidence that we'll be able to submit.
Mindy, can you tell us a little bit about the timing of this? Why is this new evidence being brought up now?
Because it's only been discovered now. So what we have is you have, starting in July of 2025, you have the Government Accountability Project that got FOIA requests that began to discover what people in the White House knew about illnesses that had not been known previously. Also, in June or July of 2025 is when Norfolk Southern came out with their statement that said that basically everything was completed in East Palestine, and it wasn't until August of 2025 that Scott Smith went in, did additional testing, and it wasn't until September or October that those testing results showed that the contamination not only was ongoing, but in fact it was worse. In addition to that, it wasn't until February of 2026 that yet another whistleblower came out and had comments to make about how the whole thing had been handled and what should have been done. So we are having a constant stream of FOIA requests, which means requests by GAP to the federal government finally being responded to, where we are seeing what they knew and when they knew it, and whistleblowers and testing coming out so that we just believe the judge should be able to see that information.
Mindy, we want to thank you for taking the time to call in to the Sound of Ideas today and update us on this major development. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, before we wrap up this part of the conversation here is that statement from Norfolk Southern that was read on the WOSU show, All Sides with Amy Jurovich. Since the 2023 derailment, the Norfolk Southern team has followed through on our commitments, completing site restoration activities, restoring local waterways, and establishing long-term monitoring plans for drinking water and community health. We've taken meaningful action to help East Palestine recover, and we remain committed to continuing to work with the national, state, and local partners to deliver a stronger future for the community. For additional information about the Norfolk Southern's work in East Palestine, visit nsmakingitright.com. And that is the statement that was shared from Norfolk Southern with WOSU. We will continue to follow this lawsuit as it develops. Now, let's get to the personal injury class action lawsuit. So here with me to talk through that, calling in by phone, we have Beth Kozar, who worked in East Palestine and would like out of the derailment personal injury settlement. Beth, welcome to the Sound of Ideas.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We also have with us in studio Jamie Wallace, former East Palestine resident who opted out of the derailment personal injury settlement. Jamie, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Brenda Toot with us, who worked in East Palestine and is waiting on a second payment in the derailment personal injury settlement. Brenda, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And with us, we also have Michael Malis. He's an attorney and partner with Kissling, Nestico, and Reddick Law Firm, which you may know more commonly as KNR. Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Now, we did reach out several times to attorneys with the law firm handling the East Palestine class action lawsuit, Grant and Eisenhofer, and none of the attorneys we emailed responded to our request to be part of this conversation. If you would like to join the conversation, you can give us a call. That number is 866-578-0903. Maybe you have a comment or a question about what people are experiencing in East Palestine, or you have a comment or a question about class action lawsuits in general. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. You can also message us on Instagram. That account is @thesoundofideas. And we'll start now, Mike, with you and ask you to tell us the different ways people can become part of a class action lawsuit and how that's working in the East Palestine case related to the Norfolk Southern derailment.
Sure. So the East Palestine case is a regular class action lawsuit. And what that means is you take a couple people who are designated to represent the entire group of individuals who are injured, and there's a global settlement done in those particular cases. There's another type of class action lawsuit called like a mass tort would be one name for it, where each party, they consolidate a bunch of cases together, but each party maintains their own lawyer, their own burdens of proof, and their own settlement capabilities. So those are the two basic ways that you could proceed.
And in this case, it's an opt-out class action lawsuit. So how does that work, it being designated as an opt-out class action?
An opt-out class action means that if you didn't specifically opt out by a certain date, then you are bound by this settlement. So about 95% of class actions like this are opt-out lawsuits. And the reason the courts think that those are fair is because they do give you a lot of notice in advance. They give you, they send notice to all the potential class members, telling them that they have the choice to opt out if they choose to. And if you do not opt out, you are included in the class. Even if you didn't submit anything to get paid, you are bound by the settlement.
So not only do you have to not opt out, you also have to file something to be part of it.
Yes. So if you didn't opt out but didn't ask for any money, you will not get any money, but you're bound by the settlement.
Okay. Now, Jamie, you live in East Palestine, but you chose not to be part of the personal injury settlement. Why was that?
Because I smelled a rat from the beginning. The first conversation I had with a class action attorney, I questioned why we had to decide to opt in or out the day before the final hearing of the National Transportation Safety Board. And I was told not to question Norfolk Southern attorneys. They weren't going to listen to my conspiracy theory, and that Norfolk Southern's attorneys had my best interest at heart. If the attorney on the opposing side has my best interest at heart, then there's an issue altogether. Some of the things that I saw wrong with this class action was for the property, you got 70,000 per household within the 1 to 2 mile zone. So for my family of 4, that was like 17,500 each. But wait, they were going to deduct all of the money that they spent for us living in a hotel and eating out for over a year. So I would have gotten $0. I also saw that the class action attorneys started a PR campaign where they were falsely leading residents to believe that they were going to get more money. They actually had a toxicologist get on a Zoom call and tell my community 0 cases of cancer, 0 long-term illness. I looked the guy up. They had speaking on LinkedIn, and he worked for Dow Chemicals. He worked for Chevron, Exxon, and a couple of other major polluters. I truly believe that our class action attorneys were not working in the best interest of the class. They were working in the best interest of their own pockets, and that can be seen by the quick payout clause that they put into the class action.
And Jamie, let us know here, you were a lifelong East Palestine resident, but you no longer live there. How long did you live there, and when did you leave?
I've basically lived there my entire life. Of course, I left to go to college. I left because my house was no longer safe. They had come into our house with these little PPIDs that they walked around and scanned the air and said my air was fine, but I had a creek running in front of my front door that I could see the chemicals in. They actually found there was a pathway to exposure in my basement, and had I went home blindly, those chemicals would have off-gassed and built up and been through my house and caused great harm to my family, if not death. So we could never go back to our home. Norfolk Southern offered to buy us out. I told them, let me get back to you. I don't know how much my life is worth, but after talking with my husband, there's no way we could do that to our community. We couldn't take the money and leave and not tell anyone in our community that our house was contaminated, because the EPA was telling everybody, no contaminated houses, everyone's fine, you're safe. But I had to tell my community what was going on. They weren't just wrong about my house.
For anyone just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about the East Palestine personal injury portion of the class action lawsuit settlement, and also class action lawsuits in general. If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. On our panel today, we have several people who did live in and work in East Palestine, and we also have an attorney here who specializes in class action lawsuits. Now, Brenda, you worked in East Palestine at the time of the derailment, and you filed a personal injury claim in the class action lawsuit. Tell us where you work and what's happened to your health since the derailment, where you worked.
At the time, I was working at East Palestine Marathon. It's right beside the tracks,
Right beside the tracks where the derailment happened?
maybe about half a mile.
Before the derailment happened?
Okay.
And I left there shortly after because I think it was PTSD that I was suffering at the time. I couldn't stand for the trains to go by. My knees would just buckle. So it was time to go. And I went to work at a hotel for a while. And I now have several health issues.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been diagnosed with?
The first diagnosis I had, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I have fatty liver disease. I'm diabetic. And I mean, I didn't have any of these things before.
Is that something you were taking notice of prior to the derailment? Were you getting regular checkups? Were you going to see a doctor?
I was getting regular checkups, and I was always like, my blood sugar was usually low. My blood sugar is now high. I did my monthly checks every month. per the, the Cancer Society and what have you. And
Are you talking about breast cancer
Yes.
self-exams?
Yes, and I found it myself.
What convinced you, Brenda, to file to be a part of the personal injury portion of the class action lawsuit?
Because I'm the grandmother of 8 and I want to be around for my grandkids. And I don't know if I'm going to have that benefit of being around for my grandchildren because, I could have a relapse in my cancer tomorrow.
How long has it been since you've been not being treated for the cancer? Are you in remission?
I am in remission, but I do take medication on a daily basis.
Okay. And can you tell us, Brenda, you did receive a check.
I did.
Can you tell us how much you received so far?
I received $496.66. I was working the night of that derailment. I went in, I was the assistant manager of the gas station. I went in to do my nightly drops, tucked the girls for a little while, and then I left. But I heard something when I was on my way home, and by the time I got home, it was all over the news. The next morning, I got up to go to work, and there's traffic blocks you can't get through. I went back home, but I was told that I needed to go to work because the store needed to open.
So the check that you got, you said it was around $400. How much
Yes.
were you expecting?
I was told by my attorney that I should be eligible for the $25,000 because I was there and I've had several health issues.
Okay. And at this point, it's a partial payment, so we'll get into that in just a moment. You are expecting a second check, as we did mention earlier. Mike, I'll ask you, can you tell us how payments were calculated for this particular situation?
There was a formula. There was a formula with regard to the personal injury part, and there was a formula with regard to the household payments. So when it came to the household payments, it was basically how many miles you were from the scene. If your house was 0 to 2 miles, it said up to 70,000. If you were 2 to 4 miles, it's up to 45,000. So that's in the class action lawsuit paperwork. For the personal injury part, it was more of you had to submit some proof of an injury, and then there was a point system that they assigned. I'm not completely familiar with the point system because it's not published, but there's a point system where they kind of review the medical records, try to get an idea of the injuries you have, and they assign points to each injury. They assign points to how far you were away from the site. They do a analysis, and then they come up with a number, and that's the number that they pay you. They didn't actually release what the point system was, so I don't know exactly how it works, but it's basically takes into consideration the type of injury you're claiming, the seriousness of that injury, how far you were from the site when it occurred, and they actually do some review of your medical records, but they don't do the type of review of your medical records as they would do if you opted out and then chose to go in that route. So you don't really have to prove proximate cause in this case. And just for clarification, one of the reasons why class action can be beneficial to some people is because you don't have the strict proof requirements when it comes to prosecution of the damages and proximate cause, proving that the train derailment is what caused your injury. They relax those, and it becomes more of you just make the claim, say how far you were from the site, they review some medical records, and they pay according to that. So it does have some advantages to be in the class action as opposed to being out of it. So it was a point system.
Jamie,
So-
was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, basically, you didn't know how much you would get when you signed up. A lot of people felt like it was a roll of the dice. What they did is they awarded pots of money. So, for example, for the personal injury, which is actually in the settlement called voluntary exposure, like we volunteered to be poisoned, there was a $120 million pot. So that pot would be divided by how many ever number of people signed up. So you didn't know what you were going to get. They were giving out approximate numbers. And what we saw, is they changed the wording to make people think they were getting more money. They never changed that pot of money. And as far as, the point system goes, I know that people were being told, oh, you can get this money and you don't have to have any symptoms. But what they failed to tell us was that if you turned in the paperwork, that you could be eligible for more money. So a lot of people did not turn in paperwork simply because they were told you don't have to show that you were sick at all. You can just get this magical. Started out at 10,000 and then they were telling us $25,000.
Brenda, how are you feeling about that check you've received so far?
I'm feeling that they've taken away from me something that I can't get back. I can't get my health back. And it's like a slap in the face. I mean, I would much rather have my health than $496.
And we do know it's a partial payment. We do know that final payments in the personal injury piece are expected by the end of March. So, Mike, let me ask you, in a situation like this where there is a partial payment and then a full payment to come later, is there anything telling about the first payment someone receives in terms of what the second payment might be? Could Brenda get a $24,000 check potentially in the second payment?
Yeah, I have to be honest and tell you, I don't know particularly what percentage the first payment has of what somebody would ultimately receive. Again, it's probably not something they released. So I really can't comment on what the 496 would mean later down the road.
Okay. We got an email in from Jan. Jan writes in, my farm is 3.45 miles northwest from the epicenter of the derailment. At 7:48 on the evening of burning the tanks, the wind shifted and came directly over my farm. So what Jan is talking about is a controlled burn that happened where vinyl chloride was burned off. This was later deemed to be unnecessary. That's what Jan is referring to now. Jan goes on to write, the attic in my 1890s farmhouse, completely insulated from the downstairs, was contaminated, verified by the then director of our region's EPA. 1 week after the derailment, I was in my attic, and within 5 minutes, I was violently choking. Jan says, I rarely go to the attic, but when I was up there several months ago, within 15 minutes, I had the same reaction. An indicator, Jan says, my attic is still contaminated. Jan says she is working with the Soil and Water Conservation District and trying to find a company that can test for whatever residual chemicals are in the attic, but no luck so far. Jan, thank you for sharing that experience with us here on The Sound of Ideas. Now, you touched on this earlier, Mike, how something can be handled as a mass tort, but it can also be a class action lawsuit. Can you remind us of the differences between a mass tort and a class action?
So a mass tort, it would be people, you could have several lawyers, several claimants. It could even be as many as have here. Each would have their own lawyers, but they bring the cases together for efficiency in the short term. But everybody maintains their right to bring their own lawsuit, to put on their own proof, and to claim their own damages. Now, again, that is usually reserved for cases where people are egregiously injured. That's when most of the time they choose the mass tort route, whereas class action is normally chosen when the injuries are more difficult to nail down and maybe more minor or maybe more. That doesn't mean they necessarily have to be more minor. That's generally when the class action is chosen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have
I would
Beth.
like to add something.
Yeah,
to
please.
that.
Welcome, Beth.
I worked for one of the attorneys, and we had an office within a mile. And we based ours off of, we are doing a mass tort, we are doing a mass tort. We had people that had diagnosis from the Cleveland Clinic that were very sick. And we were told that the judge wouldn't allow a mass tort when it was settled. And this was our best option. And all the class action attorneys were, if you don't sign this, that's fine, but we will not represent you a one-on-one because we don't want to make the judge mad. And that was said by several attorneys. And I also would like to say, we help people fill out the forms and take them to the claims center. And some people took them on their own. They would come back to our office and say, they won't take my medical. They won't take my medical. So, I'd go down there, and it was the lead attorneys from Cincinnati. And they're like, you don't need them. And they took mine and threw them in a box with everybody else's. We'll scan them later. They would not take a lot of the medical records. And a lot of clients were also told when they went down for the property to file the property claims, they'd come back to our office in an hour and say, they won't take my property claim. They say I have to sign up for personal injury. And of course, we would go down there, but as soon as they signed that agreement, class action attorneys just went AWOL on us.
Mm-hmm.
I was told so many times, you have to sign this, because Norfolk Southern will keep you in court forever and you won't get a penny.
Go ahead, Jamie.
A lot of people were bullied into signing it. Like Beth said, people were afraid when they tell you, if you opt out, we're going to drop you. Then you're left with no attorney. They would tell us things like, you're never going to be able to prove that your cancer is from the derailment. You're never going to get another chance to get money. If you don't take this, you're going to get nothing. So there was a lot of pressure and half-truths that were told to residents. And, the other thing they were told is they would have the money by that Christmas. This was 2024. So a lot of people took the money because they wanted to get out. And they saw it as their only way to get out of the continued contamination that they're living in.
We did try to reach out to class counsel, just as a reminder for our audience here on The Sound of Ideas, and did not get a response from any of the attorneys that we had reached out to. We had sent several emails hoping to get a response there. We're going to take a call from David in Cleveland Heights now. David, welcome to The Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I know this is all about personal injury, but I'm wondering if there are also any suits, either by individuals or a group or the state of Ohio, that included something about changing the operations of the railroads to prevent this from happening in the future.
Jamie, go ahead.
They did. They've introduced a couple of bills like the Railway Safety Act. And I will preface this by saying that this is not political.
And you're talking about Congress had introduced the
Correct.
Railway Safety Act.
Correct. This is not political. We were failed by the Biden administration. We're being failed by the Trump administration. It's not a matter of one party or the other needing overhauled. Our entire government needs overhauled. That railway safety bill went nowhere, because they were playing politics. But you're playing politics with people's lives. Let's not forget this train went through Cleveland. This could happen any day, anywhere, to anyone. This isn't just an East Palestine problem. And I really don't believe that politics has a place, when it comes to human health. Now, the National Transportation Board did have a whole slew of recommendations that included things like, the track detector that was supposed to detect the heat wasn't working. And they wanted to have, 2 people on the trains. But the problem with the NTSB is they don't have any authority to implement those changes that they're recommending. So they are waiting on the government agencies to voluntarily accept, these recommendations that was made by NTSB. But so far, there's been no change in these the way that these railroads operate. I never heard of precision scheduling before the derailment. Shame on me, but they just want to keep doing more with less. So when does that stop?
When we talk about legislation, some of the legislation being referred to there, the Railway Safety Act, that was bipartisan legislation that was introduced at the time by then Senator Sherrod Brown and then Senator J.D. Vance, and didn't go anywhere. And we do know, based on reporting from IdeaStream Public Media's former reporter Abigail Botar, that Representative Amelia Sykes has reintroduced something related to regulations on the railway. So we will see what happens there. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation about the East Palestine toxic train derailment class action lawsuit settlement and class action lawsuits in general. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us. We are talking about class action lawsuits today in light of the latest developments in the class action lawsuit settlement connected to the toxic train derailment that happened in East Palestine just over 3 years ago on February 3rd, 2023. Here with me today to talk about this by phone, we have Beth Kozar, who worked in East Palestine and once out of the derailment personal injury settlement. We also have Jamie Wallace, former East Palestine resident who opted out of the derailment personal injury settlement, and Brenda Toot, who worked in East Palestine and is waiting on a second payment in the personal injury settlement. Also with us, we have Michael Malis, attorney and partner with Kissling, Nestico, and Reddick Law Firm, who you probably know more commonly as KNR. I want to let our audience know we did reach out several times to attorneys with the law firm handling the East Palestine class action lawsuit, Grant and Eisenhofer, and none of the attorneys that we emailed responded to our request to be a part of this conversation. If you want to be a part of the conversation, if you have a question or a comment, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org or call us at 866-578-0903. Now, Beth, before we took the break, we were talking with you about your experience working in East Palestine. Can you tell us where you worked in relation to the derailment site?
Our office was located on Main Street, which was almost a mile away. And I'm from Boardman, which is 15 miles away. And so I really didn't know the history of East Palestine. And so my son and I was the first one on staff. So my sons helped me clean the office because it was a vacant building. And it was just a mess. And a lot of people would not meet at the office. And I thought, that's fine. They don't want to come down. Because I asked the EPA, Governor DeWine is a family friend of my brother's and my father. And he went on TV, drank the water, and said, it's fine, come on back. So I did take the job, and I thought it was safe. We were in that office, cleaning, and we just got so sick. Our tongues swelled up, extreme fatigue, stomach issues. It affected my eyes. And I went to the EPA right across the street, and she said, it's fine. I let my grandchildren play in the park. They come with me to work. And I was like, you're thinking, okay, we're being a hypochondriac. And then I find out that one of the rivers is right under my building.
Where you worked?
Yes. And then about a week in, there's a lot of stray cats in East Palestine. And of course, I was feeding them. My son and I, who was doing an internship with the company, we come to work one day and there's like 3 dead cats. So again, I walk over to the EPA and they're like, oh, there's a virus going around. And that's when I started thinking, this isn't right. We eventually moved our office to Columbiana, which was like 10 miles away. But my sons and I have lingering health effects. And I later found out that a lot of people on the staff that came in, the attorneys, they all left early because they were getting sick and nobody told us.
Now, Beth, you signed up yourself to be a part of the personal injury portion of the settlement, but now you would like to be removed from the class. Why is that?
Because of the lingering health effects. We went to the Amen Clinic, and it shows from our scans that we do have effects from the toxic chemicals. My one son, Brian, who actually helped me clean the building, he's having the most severe issues, chronic fatigue, joint pain, liver issues. And it just, you know, it breaks my heart that they lied to us.
Now, when you say you're concerned about the lingering health issues, what is it about it? Is it the fact that being a part of the personal injury settlement waives your claims to future health issues? Is that why you'd like to opt out?
Yes. I mean, you could send me $25,000 and that's going to be one trip to the Cleveland Clinic, or, you know, the Amen Clinic. It's, and I'm angry. I'm angry at myself that I trusted the government and these class action attorneys and Aaron Brockovich who said, we're here to help you. You know, then I find out Aaron won't come back because she got very, very sick. And actually her and I have the same eye problems, and she never once said anything.
Mike, let me ask you, is it possible for people in general who have signed up for a class action lawsuit and then change their mind to opt out of it?
It's extremely unlikely that the court would approve it. First of all, the opt-out date, I think, ended in 2024 in this case. I think July of 2024 was the opt-out date, where you had to opt out by that date or you were automatically included. There is some argument, I might seek the advice of a lawyer, that, you know, if you can argue, if your health problems are egregious enough, there might be some argument that the release does not cover that. But generally, it is very, very difficult to get out of a class once you have opted in, and there's not a very high chance of success on that.
And not to interrupt you, but we had a couple people that were diagnosed with life-altering damage from this, and our attorneys, this is when I knew something was going on. The one client who was very sick, very good friend of mine now, I called him to see how he's doing. He's like, I'm not allowed to talk to anybody because they're doing a backdoor deal with me, and I am going to get millions of dollars and I'm like, that does not sound right.
So,
And
go ahead, Beth. I'm
the
sorry.
attorneys did promise him that.
Mm-hmm.
They did, and I'm telling him, is this no? And they ended up sending him a check for $700.
Now, there are situations in class action lawsuits, Mike, you and I spoke about this previously, where there might be additional recovery for certain members of the class. Can you explain that?
Yeah, with regard to the personal injury, they did put something in there that if you had some extra difficult personal injuries, you could submit a claim, and there was talked about that the number might go up to as much as $35,000 in very limited circumstances if you could prove some special injury worse than others. The one thing that I wanted to address earlier is that somebody had brought up the fact that lawyers were telling them that if they tried to proceed on their own, they would get no recovery. And that sounds harsh. And believe me, I'm here in support of the victims. I'm not here in support of the railroad. But the reason lawyers tell people that sometimes is because to bring an individualized case, if you opted out, like one of the guests here has, and you want to bring your own case, you have to get doctors and experts and scientists to specifically relate injuries you suffered to this exposure. And that can be a very, very expensive proposition. First, it would be probably difficult to find a lawyer, particularly when you're making a claim of certain types of injuries, because they would say, well, I don't think I could establish the proximate cause. But then even to get the experts, you could spend $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 on experts just trying to prove that you had an injury from this incident. And then the railroad will hire their own experts, and then they will have their own experts to say you didn't, and then you have to prove that in a courtroom. And so it becomes almost cost prohibitive in a way for many people to go down that route. And it also makes it difficult, honestly, to find lawyers, because a lawyer is going to take a case when he thinks that he could make that link. And if the lawyer, if he or she does not think they could make that link, it would be difficult for them to sign on to a case. Now, I'm not saying no lawyer would do it. There are lawyers who might take the chance, but that's one of the reasons why class actions exist, because they eliminate the stringent requirements of proving that everything you suffered is directly related to that incident.
Jamie?
Mike,
I
what
can just-
common sense come into this? Like, that was a bomb that went off, okay? And you wouldn't live down there. You wouldn't want your family to live down there. I mean, this is almost like the problem with the legal system. If I'm not going to make money, I am not going to help you.
That is
And
an interesting piece of the conversation is personal injury cases are taken on a contingency basis. And Mike, can you just give us a high level answer explaining contingency fees?
Yeah, it's basically a lawyer will take a case and not make you pay him by the hour or her by the hour. You don't have to pay by the hour for the services. In the end, if they get a recovery for you, they take a certain percentage of the recovery instead of sending you bills constantly about the amount of hours they're spending on a case. So yes, most personal injury cases are done on a contingency. And to your point, ma'am, that it sounds like the lawyers aren't trying to protect you, I get it. I get it 100%. And I got to tell you that that's a pretty common statement that people make. But I can tell you from experience that if we think we can help somebody, we're always going to try to help you. It's to our advantage to do so. It's to our advantage because we do this for a good reason, because we care about people, and also, it could be financially beneficial to us and the people we're representing. So when I say that it's difficult to find lawyers in certain cases, I'm not trying to discount what you went through, nor am I trying to say you won't be able to find any. I'm just trying to give an honest opinion about why sometimes this is more difficult than people think it's going to be.
Jamie, you had something to say?
Yeah, if you have good class action attorneys, it might be a good way. Not only did, when he was talking about not being able to get out of the suit, not only did they blatantly lie to us and tell us there would be 0 cases of cancer and 0 long-term illness, that's something that people relied on when making their decision. They had this toxicologist tell us, but yet they had hired one of the leading dioxin experts in the United States to come down and test our properties. Our homeowners were told that they would get that money or get the results from that testing. Not only did we never receive those results, the results were sealed. And they were trying to do these backdoor deals with people, but I understand what you're saying about extraordinary circumstances, and that was in there. But when you tell someone they can't speak about their illnesses in public, or they're not going to get this backdoor deal, you're lying to people to get them to sign up. The second thing that I wanted to say about our system is, our criminal justice system is supposed to be for the people, by the people. You go in front of a jury of your peers. Now it's gotten to the point where all the attorneys make plea agreements because it costs them less money and it's easier to do. And now the whole system is controlled by the judges and by these attorneys and not by the people. And I honestly believe, when you talk about not being able to prove the cause, we can't prove the cause. The fact of the matter is there's a gap in the research. We know that what reportable limits of vinyl chloride are and at what level they make you sick. But when they get that information, they only subject that subject to one single chemical at a time. What happens when you're exposed to 50 different chemicals at the same time, even if they're right below that limit? But what we can use is we can use our past experiences from other disasters. I mean, you're seeing right now all the illnesses that are coming out from 9/11. We can also use, like they did in the PACT Act, the presumptive causation. If you were in East Palestine from this time to this time and came down with one of these 25 illnesses, we automatically assume that it's from the chemicals. We're seeing all the same symptoms that our Gulf War vets saw. So even though you can't prove it, it just has to be beyond the preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, in a civil trial.
I want to remind our audience that we did reach out to class counsel in the lawsuit and invited them to be a part of this conversation. We didn't get a response from any of the attorneys with GNE that we had reached out to, hoping that they would join us today. If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about the toxic train derailment in East Palestine and the class action lawsuit that resulted from that. We are also talking about class action lawsuits in general. And we were talking about some of the symptoms there. So Brenda, first to you, I would like to ask you, you shared with me some stories of people that you know in your community, in the East Palestine community, that are experiencing some health issues. Do you mind sharing some of those with us?
Yes, I thought I was the only breast cancer person over there, but I recently met a lady, same age as me and everything. She has the exact same breast cancer that I had in the exact same area that I had. Not to mention there's a gentleman I believe his name's Wayne, isn't it?
Yep.
He has breast cancer, male breast cancer. I mean, and there's more cancer showing up on a daily basis. I mean, it is so sad when they said, there's 0% of you getting cancer, but yet here we are. And when I went to some of the public meetings and I did speak with someone, they told me that my cancer didn't enter into this.
Mike, from a general class action lawsuit perspective here, some of the things that Jamie mentioned were symptoms that people had from the Gulf War, symptoms that people had from 9/11. We're 3 years out from the train derailment in East Palestine. Is that typical timing for people to be part of a personal injury class action settlement?
Yeah, well, first of all, most of the time, your personal injury settlement, you have to bring a lawsuit within 2 years, okay? I mean, that can be extended at times to what's known as discovery rule, whereas you find out later down the road that you had some health consequences that were not known of earlier. But the discovery rule is not something I would generally rely on because so whenever you bring a lawsuit, you try to bring it within the 2 years, okay? Particularly if it's an injury you think you may have suffered within the 2 years. You bring the lawsuit within 2 years because you have to. And then with regard to injuries that people may suffer in the future, you almost have to get experts to project the types of injuries that people will suffer into the future, and you have to compensate for them today. So the law is not generally set up for injuries that occur 15 to 20 years down the road. It's just not set up that way because you have a 2-year statute of limitations. And you have to bring that lawsuit within that time or you can't bring it at all. And even if you have an exception sometimes, like for instance, product liability has a 10-year statute of repose. So even if you get past the statute of limitations, which is 2 years, you must bring that lawsuit within 10 years or you don't have that right anymore. In a medical malpractice, there's a 4-year statute of repose. So basically what that means is even if you bring the lawsuit, if you don't bring it within the 2 years because of the discovery rule, whatever, they have an end date where you must, which is like 4 years or 10 years or something like that called a statute of repose. So it's very difficult to bring lawsuits today to compensate people for things that are going to happen to them in the future, unless you can prove it's going to happen in the future.
We got an email in from Marvin. Marvin writes, anytime there is an imbalance of wealth or power between parties in a case, a settlement will always favor the wealthier party because they have the resources to push others around who in turn feel like they have to take what they can get. The lawyers on both sides always win, of course. Cases like this should be handled by a public jurisdiction to remove that power disparity and avoid wasting exorbitant private attorney fees. The legal system can only be fair on an even playing field. Marvin, thank you for sharing that comment with us here on The Sound of Ideas. Jamie, I want to ask you about your involvement with Mindy Bish. Mindy Bish is representing people who did opt out of the lawsuit. That's the category you fall into. So what's happening there? What are you expecting from that representation?
A jury trial. That's where I feel like we get justice in front of people, in front of our people, because there is that imbalance of, here I am just an average Joe, that works a regular job. I don't have the millions of dollars that, you would need to get these experts. So we are hoping to get in front of a jury trial. I believe at last count, she represented about 700 of us. But I don't think that you can show any reasonable American that picture of that bomb that was dropped on us and show that people were perfectly healthy before and now we're all coming down with the same illnesses. I'm older, I'm overweight. Yeah, I could have come down with asthma just because of those factors, but I've never had asthma, trouble breathing in my life. After the derailment, I've been diagnosed with not only asthma, but an adult chronic cough. I don't even know what that is. I just cough all the time. And it might just be me. But when you have 300 other people that were diagnosed with asthma, I don't think that any reasonably prudent person could say that the two things were not related. So our hope is to get in front of a jury trial and to actually get justice. Not so much for me. I honestly could care less about myself. I'm old, like I said, overweight, almost 50. But my daughter's 6 years old. She doesn't deserve this, and we don't know what's going to happen to our children. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that are truly going to pay for what's happened in East Palestine in Pennsylvania.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this conversation. I want to thank our panel for being here today. On the phone, we have Beth Kozar, who worked in East Palestine and would like out of the derailment personal injury settlement. Beth, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Here in studio, we have Jamie Wallace, a former East Palestine resident who opted out of the derailment personal injury settlement. Jamie, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having us. Awareness is what we need right now, so I truly appreciate you still staying on top of this topic.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. And Brenda Toot, who worked in East Palestine as well, waiting on your second payment in the derailment personal injury settlement. Thanks for being here, Brenda.
Thank you.
And Michael Malis, attorney and partner with Kissling, Nestico, and Reddick Law Firm, KNR. Thanks for being with us today, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
That wraps up the show for today. Now, if you missed any part of the show, you can hear a rebroadcast tonight at 9 on 89.7 WKSU. You can also find every episode of The Sound of Ideas wherever you get your podcasts and on the IdeaStream Public Media YouTube page. To get the last word on today's topics, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org or find us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Now, yesterday we shared a slightly shortened version of our community tour conversation on the future of Burke Lakefront Airport, which city and county officials want to close down. One concern that came up was that closing Burke might mean the Cleveland National Air Show will go away. Patricia from East Cleveland wrote in, responding to that idea. She wrote, "Whoever thinks that everybody loves the air show hasn't spoken to a lot of the people I know. Many despise the noise. Many despise the militarism." Thank you for your thoughts on that, Patricia. We appreciate that. Tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, we'll talk about travel concerns amid what's happening with the U.S. and Israel war on Iran and the current partial federal government shutdown. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for keeping the conversation going. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas.